Alright guys, it's Izzy, and in this video I'm going to talk about the best argument against RPE. So if you've been watching my channel lately, I just recently put out a video talking about the worst argument against RPE, which had to do with people saying that you couldn't set goals for individual training sessions on RPE. Well, now what I want to talk about is one of the biggest drawbacks of quote-unquote RPE training. So it's really important to note that there's actually two branches of auto-regulated training. One is the auto-regulation of intensity, and the other is the auto-regulation of volume. So the auto-regulation of intensity has to do with what weight or what weights you're going to be using that day, right? And the auto-regulation of volume has to do with roughly how many sets, how many reps, what tonnage that you're going to get done that day. They're actually two separate things, and you can do them one or just the other. So for example, you could work from a fixed number, like say 200 pounds, and then you would repeat 200 pounds for however many sets and reps until it became RPE 10. The volume would be auto-regulated, but the intensity would not be. Now here's an example of intensity auto-regulation where volume is not auto-regulated. Let's say that you worked up to, you're going to do 5 sets no matter what, but you want all of those sets to be roughly 8 to 9 RPE. So you work up to a set of 5 reps at RPE 8. You repeat that weight until it becomes at 9, and then maybe you take some weight off so that it's back to in between that 8 to 9 range that you want it to be. So hopefully you guys get what I'm saying here. You can auto-regulate volume or intensity or both. Now, a lot of you guys may not know this, but Reactive Training Systems, which is Mike Teixeira's coaching business, his product lines basically no longer uses what you guys know as fatigue percents. And fatigue percents, or at least for the most part, they don't. And fatigue percents are basically the main way that people have been auto-regulating volume with RPE-based training systems. In other words, we're talking about things like load drops, where you work up to, say, a set of 5 at 9, you take 5% weight off of the bar, and you repeat that until it becomes RPE 9 like the top set was. So again, they don't actually use that system anymore. And here's why that's important, and here's what I think is the best argument against RPE. All right, if you're a novice, one of the main reasons that you can't use RPE is because you cannot accurately rate RPEs yet. You don't actually know what RPEs are. And this even applies to intermediates who haven't been practicing the skill of tracking their RPE. You're probably just not that good yet at telling what is truly at 8 or at 9. What it really is having 1 rep left or 2 reps left, etc. So let's think about this. Novices can't use it because they don't understand RPE, right? Now let's talk about advanced athletes. Advanced athletes, for the most part, have trouble auto-regulating volume, and here's why. Most athletes, advanced athletes that is, need very high levels of submaximal volume to make progress. They have to keep the RPEs low in order to do the amount of volume that is necessary to progress, because if they did higher RPEs, they wouldn't be able to actually do the volumes necessary and still recover. In other words, if they did 10 sets of 5 at RPE 8 or higher, they're going to be demolished. Whereas they might actually be able to do, 10 sets of 5 throughout the week if the RPEs are kept to, at 6 or even lower. It's very common for advanced athletes to do a lot of volume where the RPE is, below 6. So here's the problem with that. How do you auto-regulate volume if the RPEs are below 6 and you don't even really know how much more you can do? Well, the answer to that question is that you basically just don't. And that's kind of one of the conclusions that the reactive training systems people came to. And what they have people do now generally is just auto-regulate intensity with an initial set, and then the volume is fixed. So what they usually do is they'll have people say work up to a moderate single at RPE, 7 or 8, and then use that single as kind of like a daily max to determine the back off sets or the weight of the back off sets, right? So for example, let's say that you worked up to, a set was a single, right? You did 100 pounds at 8. You would use that as roughly 90% of your max for the day, and then your volume work afterwards might be something like 70% of that daily max for 6 sets of 5, right? So the point here is that volume is no longer auto-regulated. Now, you may have noticed that the only group of athletes I haven't talked about yet are intermediate athletes. So again, quick recap. Novices can't use RPE at all because they're not good at it. Advanced athletes probably can't get away with auto-regulating their volume because it's just not precise enough, and because they're doing a lot of these sub-maximal sets where rating the RPE is basically impossible, right? If you could do between 5 to 8 reps more, then no one can judge that accurately. RPEs tend to have to be pretty close to failure to be judged accurately. 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 reps can be judged accurately. So the last group that we haven't talked about is intermediates. And I think intermediates are probably the one group of athletes where, in the right circumstances, they can benefit from both the auto-regulation of intensity and volume. And the reason for that is that intermediates, like novices, still mostly make progress based off of intensity. In other words, unlike advanced athletes that need these huge volumes at submaximal weights, intermediates generally need moderate amounts of volume at moderate intensities. Like something in the range of 3, 4, 5 sets a workout at higher RPEs, at 7, at 8, at 9. And this is where the traditional RPE system with low drops, taking 5% off of it and repeating it, or, repeats or rep drops makes a lot of sense. It makes sense for intermediates who don't need tons of volume at submax weights, and they're not novices where they just can't rate RPE accurately at all. So in my opinion, to come to a point of all this, to draw a conclusion, what is the best argument against RPE? And it's that it lacks precision when it comes to volume control in advanced athletes. Because let's face it, everybody ends up as an advanced athlete eventually if they've been doing this for long enough. The idea that because you've got 5% intra-session fatigue, and what that means is, let's say you did a set of 100 pounds at 9 and you dropped 5% down to 95 pounds, and now that 95 pounds is at 9, so you've lost 5% force production in that particular lift. The idea that you've got 5% intra-session fatigue means that you've got a certain amount of systemic fatigue from that training session is basically just inaccurate. For example, we know that if you do only one set at 10, that's going to create a fatigue debt. Although in the RPE system, you wouldn't have measured any percent fatigue, right? The other thing is, let's say that you do 5 sets of 5 at RPE 8, and the RPE never increases. Technically, you've got 0% fatigue, right? But we know that those 5 sets of 5 were going to create systemic fatigue, even if for whatever reason it didn't create intra-session fatigue. So basically the problem here with RPE, specifically the auto-regulation of volume with RPE, is that it's imprecise. There's not a great way to do it because intra-session fatigue is only a loose correlate to systemic fatigue. So again, the idea that RPE is perfect is absolutely flawed. I'm definitely not the one to say that everybody should use RPE. And in fact, a lot of my clients at this point use RPE to determine their weights for their accessory exercises or secondary exercises where, percentages aren't always appropriate. But for a lot of my clients, their main lift programming is determined actually by fixed volumes, that I tell them how many sets to do. Even if they're RPE based, I'll tell them do between 6 to 8 sets or something like that. So they still have a little room for auto regulation, but it's fixed number of sets, it's fixed volumes. And I think that's the best argument against RPE, at least the old system, is that the volume control is imprecise. It's hard to rate sets below 6 or 7, and advanced athletes need those sets. Novices can't even use RPE. So what we're really left with is there's a group of intermediates for whom full RPE training is effective. And for everybody else, you kind of need to use an amalgam of RPE, percentage, and other regulation techniques to create a system that is all around effective. Anyways, hope you guys found that video interesting, informative, entertaining, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? If you have ideas for other video topics, leave a comment. I'll try to get around to them. As always, my friends, have a great day. Good luck with your training, and peace.